fantastical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL network.
Yes, so welcome on in, everybody, to the Saturday Night Network for another edition of our Monday Night Roundtable, coming to you after the Dakota Johnson and Justin Timberlake episode of Saturday Night Live. Jon here from the SNN, very excited to talk through everything from this episode. I feel like so many storylines came out of this week, so I'm really pumped to get into them. I think we have a lot more to talk about than last week's show, so it's going to be a good one. Get ready, and I'm excited to see your thoughts in the chat if you're joining us live tonight as well. So let's bring in our panelists that we have here tonight, and first up is the great Bill Kenney. Bill, how are you?
Jon, I am great. I'm so excited that I'm on this week and not last week. There's a lot more to talk about, and I'm on with Rich Tackenberg, which for those trivia buffs, we were on the very first roundtable on SNL Stats, Chris Rock episode, season 46. And Jon, you thought we did so well together that you waited 3.5 years to bring us back together. So I can't decide if we're Justin Timberlake and Jimmy Fallon coming back to SNL or if we're O'Donoghue and Belushi. I don't know if you have a choice, Rich, but...
Well, let's bring in Rich Tackenberg then to talk through this all. So, Rich, how are you?
I'm good. You know, I'm assuming that there's a large percentage of the SNN audience fan base that thinks Bill and I are the same person. So this is a reminder that we're actually two different people.
Yeah, I honestly could not believe that the two of you have not been on a show together. You've been on so many shows here over like the 350 something shows that we've done. It's been that long. And honestly, it's because you're both so great that I like to separate the greatness, but it's good to have you both together. That's how you know we're going to have a great show here tonight. And of course, we couldn't do this all without another great panelist joining us tonight. And that is Zoe Walker. Zoe, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm excited to be talking to these guys. I feel like I'm talking to the SNL like mega brain, and you guys all know like way more than I ever could. So I'm excited to learn a lot.
Yeah,
is that code for old, Zoe?
Yeah.
Yes, it's code.
I know it. Yes.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, you don't have to know everything about Saturday Night Live to watch the show. We like getting, different types of panelists and people who maybe have just watched the last few years versus some who have watched it for decades, like our other two panelists here tonight. So it is very exciting to have everyone on here to talk through a show that brought in hosts who had previously been on in different eras. Let's start with Dakota Johnson, who hosted previously right after the 40th anniversary of Saturday Night Live. I remember Dakota Johnson coming in. Everyone was, 50 Shades of Grey crazy at the time and excited to see her at the show. And she mentioned in the monologue, obviously, that she had this big moment during the 40th anniversary where she does that Q&A. And it's always like, well, I'm the next person hosting the show. What's that going to be like? And that is an SNL trope that they've done for every anniversary show. And then she came on and I thought she was okay. I think she was given, if I remember correctly, a pretty hard time back in February of 2015 because she did an ISIS commercial, which is hard to find, I'm pretty sure, because there was a lot of controversy about it. And that sort of was the, big storyline coming out of the episode, as opposed to Dakota Johnson, who I thought was okay and had some interesting energy. So I was excited to see Dakota back at the show. Let's talk through her first. Bill, what were your thoughts when they announced Dakota Johnson was going to be hosting the show?
She would have been on the list of people I never thought would have come back. Not that her episode wasn't great, but it was a very moment in time, as you said, the ISIS, which they kind of make a meta reference to that we might get to later on tonight. But the whole 50 Shades of Grey, the internet dress, the white and gold dress. There was a joke about that in that episode. Birdman. So there was a lot of net neutrality. So there was a lot of stuff that was very 2015. So to see her in modern times, almost a decade later, come back. And I think she was serviceable. I don't think she was the greatest. I don't know that we'll see her a third time, but yeah, she did a good job and was game for everything.
Yeah, and I was excited too because, this is we posted a graphic on Instagram last week of all the family members who, have their Nepo truce going and can all host the show, throughout the history. But, her mom hosted the show back in 1988. So that was really cool when she spoke about that in her first monologue. So, I didn't dislike Dakota Johnson on SNL, I think, as much as a lot of people. So I thought it would be really interesting to see her again. Rich, what did you think about the announcement when she was coming back?
I was nervous. We've talked about here a lot. I'm always a little nervous when a film actor or actress who doesn't have experience in front of a live audience is going to come in, even if they've done film comedy. And even though I think Dakota Johnson did an okay job, I remember the ISIS video actually being quite funny. It was a pre-tape. It was not a live sketch. So I think I had the same concerns that I had back in the 40. Now, I will say back in 40, as you alluded to host that show after the 40th was you're being set up to fail. There's no way that you can compete with the star power that came out of the 40th episode. So I think she was sort of set up to fail, but I came into this a little bit nervous. And what I took away from it, and we'll talk about it in general, was I thought SNL did a very good job working with someone who was in fact not strong in live sketches. And I think that they did a good job making the most of having an actress who is talented in front of a film camera, but maybe is not as strong in live sketches.
100% agreed. I mean, she has such a dry sense of humor, and you saw that in some of the pieces tonight that we're going to talk about, that it is maybe a little bit more difficult to write for her. And I don't know that the writers, ended up coming through on, some people's concerns about that. So it's interesting to see. I was hoping and I was very excited, truth be told, because I felt like the promo that they put out last week, again, a pre-taped thing, but the promo they had with her walking around the studio made me feel like she was really game for anything. So to me, this was fun. Zoe, were you excited when you saw Dakota Johnson hosting the show? And what is your history with Dakota?
I was really excited. I was an actual child the first time she was on the show, so I don't really remember that. But to me, she's famous for if any of you have seen her Architectural Digest video where she had a huge bowl of limes on her table and she said, "I love limes," but it was a big lie because she's allergic to limes. I just thought that was like really great chaotic energy, and I love her humor. Then also I love
She
her
was
because
liming.
yes, she was okay. I also love her because she started beef with Ellen about inviting her to her birthday party. So I know a lot of like pop culture like niche things about her. So I was excited because I think she's a funny person, but she did let me down a little bit. I should have been less excited. I should have been more wise as a child and known that she might not have been the best on SNL.
Yeah, I wonder, and I was maybe given a couple clues to this when Justin Timberlake did an interview with Zane Lowe, a very famous radio DJ who, often talks about new music, and JT has an album coming out, and I got to watch it, and Zane was asking JT, like, why are you doing SNL again? Like, why are you coming back for the first time in a while? And he was like, well, I got the new album coming out. Like, there's a lot of really cool things that I want to do to promote it. And then he was like, well, everybody must be really excited. How come you're not hosting? And JT sort of alluded to the fact that he was asked to host, but he chose to be the musical guest, and it was just better timing for him at this point. So, this is a very unique situation that we have in this episode. And I'm very curious, like Bill, Rich, and Zoe, like your opinions on this, because like I can't think of another episode in SNL history where the musical guest is so prolific in terms of SNL compared to the host. Perhaps like Paul Simon, but Paul Simon is really like never like was an amazing host of the show. He sort of just like hosted by default at certain times. But I can't think of a situation where you have a host of the show who's there, who was like hosted before, so she's okay. It's not like this is another 5-timer. And then you have, sort of the second headliner for the show who is celebrated in SNL streets as like being one of the better hosts in the history of the show, is a 5-timer, had a huge 5-timers club moment, opened up SNL 40. Like, we're talking about a legend of the show. So it's, it's kind of tough for Dakota because she puts herself in a position here where she's not going to get the headlines no matter what happens on this episode, I think. So, Bill, I am curious what your thoughts on that are on that. And then Justin Timberlake returning to the show altogether.
I think the only other time in recent history would probably be Miley with Elon Musk, right?
But different, right?
It was definitely different because I think the fear was that he was just going to implode, and you needed to have this backup, surefire host that could come in. I don't think that was the concern with Dakota, but yeah, I mean, as far as the musical guest outshining the host, I think that's probably the most recent event of that. But as far as Justin, I mean, been so excited. I'm not even going to compare what you felt because I know what a big fan you are, but he is way up there for me as well. He is probably the best host in the last 20 years. So to not have him for the last decade at all, not even as a musical guest, not in a cameo, and to have him finally come back was just such a great thing. I know we all wanted him to host as opposed to just being a musical guest, but I'm happy we got what we got, and we got a lot from him as well.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about, Justin Timberlake's legacy at SNL because, if we don't do it now, I don't know when we will. But first, Rich, let me get your opinion on JT being the musical guest, versus Dakota hosting and how that may have affected the overall show. Can you guys hear Rich? Oh, Rich, yeah, we don't have audio for you right now.
How about now? Sorry.
Yeah, we're good. Got you. Yep.
Sorry, I don't know how that happens. Yeah, as you were both saying, I agree. It almost felt unfair to Dakota Johnson when I saw the announcement that she was so overshadowed by JT coming back. And I don't know who you could have paired him with. Obviously, this was timing. In retrospect, having seen the show, I almost wondered if it was engineered to have sort of a backup host, is the way that Bill was saying. Although I think between Man and Webb and his album, I do think it was just a matter of timing. But so I agree with, I did feel bad, but I did agree with why, how am I going to say this? I do think it's smart these days, given that the show is more watched digitally, that if you are promoting an album or if you're promoting a new release, it is better to be in a sketch or two than to be in every single sketch of the night and do 2 songs. And I think we see that more with people like Taylor Swift, who are realizing, unless you're just promoting yourself or you want to have a good time, then come and be the host and the musical guest. But if your goal is for the story to be, wow, those songs were great, do 1 sketch, do a cameo, but don't be in every single sketch. So I think he made the right career move to do it this way so that it would focus on the music and not him as a comedian, because he's just great on the show. I mean, and it would be hard not to spend a lot of time talking about him and a little time talking about his music had he been the host.
It's a very good point. Zoe, what do you think of that?
I mean, that makes sense to want to promote the music opposed to him as a host, but I really think the reason he wasn't the host for this episode is his bad PR. Like, people are buying Britney Spears songs just to top his new releases. So I think people just really hate him, and SNL didn't want to take the risk.
Yeah, see, I will completely say that I don't think that's the case. I think if SNL, first of all, SNL is not worried about bad PR. If that was the case, they wouldn't have had Dave Chappelle walk up on the Good Nights this week. So
we'll talk about that. Yeah,
that's like for sure. They wouldn't be booking the Donald Trumps and the Elon Musks of the world. Like, I think that they honestly, I'm not gonna say they don't care, but I just think that they're such an institution that they, that doesn't faze them. I will say, like, I don't really want to get into the Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears stuff here. I don't know that we're like the platform for that type of thing, because look, there's more stuff even today, like with Britney Spears, like, quote unquote, apologizing to Justin Timberlake and saying that she loves his music. Like, this stuff has been in storyline for months and months and months that have followed JT and Britney. I think when it comes to SNL, when it comes to the bookings, they are focused on like Justin Timberlake on Saturday Night Live. And JT on the show is like an identity of his own that isn't necessarily one that falls out of the show. It's just interesting. I want to talk about the legacy of Justin Timberlake just on Saturday Night Live for a few minutes, because I mentioned this on Saturday a little bit. Back in 2003, when JT hosted for the first time, I strongly believe that was one of the biggest uproars that I've seen prior to an episode of a host announcement, of being like, why are we doing this? Why are we getting this like teeny bopper host to come in? I don't think anybody was excited. I remember like reading news articles and on chat forums of people being like, this is a horrible booking. And he came on, and I've never seen a host like slay like all the haters as quickly as him. And I just find, like, I've seen that, and maybe this is because I'm such a fan of him, I've just found like every time between his hosting appearances, people are always like shitting on JT. And then he comes out and he hits like grand slams every time. And it reminds people like, oh yeah, Justin Timberlake is a great SNL host. And like, there's just not many people personally that I think are above him as far as like just full well-roundedness as an SNL host. Some of the episodes he hosted where he's doing double duty, he is like, it is a show unlike like any other. Like there's only like a handful of hosts in SNL history that can like take over a night in that way. And that may not be your thing, but for me, I was absolutely amazed every time Justin Timberlake hosted the show. So to get him back at the show is truly something I actually thought I would never see again, because my argument over the last few years to get him in a potential SNL Hall of Fame was always shut down by the fact that he was a part of one era of the show. And guess what? He came back. So I was thrilled about it. Want to get all of your thoughts. Rich, you look very excited to jump in here, so let me go to you first.
Well, I remember vividly, this will not shock you. I've never been the hugest NSYNC fan. I'm too old for the Mickey Mouse Club. When Justin Timberlake was announced in 2003, my attitude was, oh boy.
You were that person.
I was the epitome of like, oh, Jesus. And he crushed it. He was so good. I was like, all right. And I remember feeling that way when Bruno Mars hosted, but not as much. I mean, he was so good. And I see it again, when Dakota Johnson, and I'm going to bring it back to Justin, but I will say the point I was going to make about Dakota Johnson as relative to JT is I don't think that she struggled because she has a dry sense of humor. I don't think that she has enough experience in front of a live audience. And what I saw is when she was doing the monologue Saturday night, it was very okay. She was trying, she was game, but she doesn't have it. When Justin Timberlake walked onto that stage, his magnetic energy before he said a word was far superior than what most guest hosts can do with words. And then when he started, I was just like, oh, I feel like he was genetically engineered to host Saturday Night Live. And we saw that again last night or Saturday night.
100%. Here, let me play that line when he comes in.
If you want me to be in sketches, I have hosted before.
I think it's the 5 times behind her. And
yeah,
I totally agree. Honestly, it does like that type of thing that he did in the monologue this week reminds me a lot of what like Steve Martin used to do. Like when Steve Martin, he hosted a lot in the first few years of the show, Bill, and then he didn't come back for a while, and he would make all these cameo appearances. And like every time he came on, it's like, whoa, Steve Martin's hosting the show, like, or is cameoing at the show? Like that was crazy. And like that sort of was like JT, that type of thing, like walking to a sketch. That was the magnetism that I got. So how did you feel about it?
Oh, 100%, both of you. I think to kind of build on what Rich is saying, like when I like to say the two things in the last 20 years that have surprised me the most. If you would put me in a time machine to like 1999 and said, the kid from NSYNC is going to be the best host you're going to see over the next 20 years, and that kid from All That is going to be on the show longer than anybody in the history of the show, I would have said, you're crazy, you're on crack. And it's true. Like he is, and to put him above somebody, I don't know if you can put him above a Steve Martin, a Buck Henry, and Alec Baldwin, but the fact that he does come in and do double duty, does do everything on the show, and he has some all-time classic episodes. His first 2 especially, I think, are all-time classics. So yeah, I to hear that audience reaction when he said he could be in sketches was palpable, and we don't get that a lot these days, other than them turning on the audience applause sign. So to get a real reaction from the crowd like that is very rare.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, like there is a big 4 when it comes to hosts with Alec Baldwin, Steve Martin, Tom Hanks, and John Goodman, who I think span eras and just really are like the hosts of all hosts from this show. I do think that JT is probably in that next category with like a Christopher Walken, perhaps a Buck Henry, a Scarlett Johansson, Drew Barrymore, like those types that have, sort of had their own, areas at the show where they've really dominated. Zoe, what are your thoughts on Justin Timberlake on Saturday Night Live?
I mean, he's like a once in a generation type performer, singer, dancer, actor, charisma, all of that. He didn't impact my life as much as you guys. So it wasn't like, I was like, oh, Justin Timberlake. Because I feel like whenever I think of SNL, my whole life, he has been associated with it. So it's like, duh, obviously. So I was just like, okay, he's coming. I feel like that's what he's supposed to do. So I didn't feel any deep excitement or deep connection to him, but I knew he was going to put on a good show and be in some sketches one way or another.
Yeah, I'll say one last thing before we move on to the episode is that I think, obviously I was a big NSYNC fan, love Justin Timberlake's music and really enjoyed a lot of the media that he's put out, followed his career for sure. I think the thing that I always loved about him on SNL, beyond the fact that he created great sketches and iconic moments, was he has a deep reverence for the show that not many other hosts have. Like, he's there, and he is the type of host that has actually gone and watched and fell in love with like the 70s of Saturday Night Live. And like when he and Andy Samberg like get together and they're going to bring the Dick in a Box guys onto a game show with the two wild and crazy guys, that comes out of a love for the show with him and Jimmy Fallon. And like, that's why I resonate with the connection that Justin and Jimmy have. And like, that flows down to my love for the show. So for me, it was just a very, very exciting Saturday night to get to see him back at the show, even if it was just a little bit. So, yeah. Anything else you want to say off the top before we get into the episode?
I will float the theory that maybe he did not want to host because he is of the generation of Jimmy Fallon and Andy Samberg, and as someone who's in his early 40s, doesn't feel as comfortable playing with people that are almost half of his age. I don't know it to be true, but I would say that is another credible theory as to why he's not jumping in. And when we did see him, he was not with, he was really with the people of his generation.
Yeah, I will hope that maybe he got to bond with some cast members, and I actually got some word that like the cast really loved Justin Timberlake. A lot of people who didn't know him before said he's super cool. So I heard that today, and like I hope that they bonded a little bit together so that next year at the 50th we may actually get a Justin Timberlake hosted appearance, because if you're going to bring back some legendary hosts from the show, that's the time to do it, because then you can have the cast, you can bring in some cameos. Seems like the perfect thing. So let's get into our episode that we saw here on Saturday night, and let's talk about the cold open. So a very different cold open than what we've gotten in recent times. This time we get the NFL on CBS cold open. So it was interesting to talk about this on Saturday, the day before this game actually happened. Now we're the day after it happened. So let's look back to the day where it is the most exciting day if you are a fan of the NFL. This is something that I've discussed with my friends many times, which was sort of the premise of this sketch, which is like, this is our day. And, yesterday I was watching football with some guys that like I always watch the playoffs with, and we were talking about what we're going to do for the Super Bowl. And they were like, okay, so I think we're going to go to this person's house, and like all significant others are invited. And then we started to get into discussion. We're like, oh, like, well, if significant others are invited, like, is this going to be like in a few years, are we going to start having like kids there and stuff like that too? And it turned into a whole like rabbit hole of like, oh yeah, the Super Bowl is no longer a game for us. Like, that was our day. The final, the semifinals of the football is our day. So I thought that the concept here was really fun. Bill, I'd love to hear what you thought of the NFL on CBS cold open that we got.
Much the same as you. It's so relatable. It's probably the most relatable cold open I've seen for myself in a long time. And it's true. I've hosted a Super Bowl party for many, many years, and the kids are there and the spouses are there, and the people not knowing how many points a touchdown is worth. And so, yeah, this is the last moment. We've had 18, 20 weeks of football as fans. I'm a big baseball guy as well, so I've got a few weeks until I can start watching spring training games, but that's not even the same. That's not sitting down watching football for 7 or 8 hours. So it's really kind of a depressing time of year. And they hit all the notes. I think Dismukes' Tony Romo was fantastic. I love Devin Walker continuing his hot streak the last couple weeks. I think he did a great Nate Burleson. We got a lot of good stuff here. Keenan with the meta reference to nothing being funny, or nothing being worthwhile watching live except for football these days. So a lot of really, really good stuff in this. I really enjoyed this one a lot.
I actually think Keenan was the star of this cold open with some of the line deliveries that he had here. So you just mentioned this one, Bill.
There's no other live TV that's even remotely watchable.
Some people would agree with you, Keenan, but I thought he also had some really other good lines where this one where they're talking about the Pro Bowl.
I have been covering football for 30 years. and I have never once watched the Pro Bowl.
Just, I think, this was some on fire, best type of Keenan line delivery stuff that we got. I want to go to Zoe next. Zoe, what did you think of this? Are you a sports fan? Did you enjoy it?
Not a sports fan. The Super Bowl is actually the only time in my life I can think of that I've seen football on purpose. So I'm not grieving the loss of football, but I understand the concept and I thought it was clever. The connection I had was the Fast and Furious joke and the song. I'm a huge fan of the Fast and Furious franchise. I have PowerPoints explaining my love for it. So I was like, okay, family. And then singing the song, it did make me sad because it makes me think of Paul Walker, but I thought it was kind of an interesting way to wrap it up. It felt chaotic or like TikTok humor to start singing that song. I don't know, silly, goofy. But
did that part work for you? Because I felt like that's the part where the cold open sort of fell off for me. It was like we were trying to force in a musical number here when the premise itself was good.
I think what the reason it worked for me is because I'm so far removed from understanding being sad about football ending that the Charlie Puth song was like, Zoe, this is the part you understand, so wake up and pay attention. So I don't think it worked for me, but I think it like brought my attention back to the TV.
All right, Rich, what did you think of our cold open this week?
I haven't been a sports fan in 30 plus years and married to a baseball fanatic. So, sort of married into it. I'll tell you why I like this so much. First of all, coming into the episode, I was so unbelievably pleasantly surprised earlier in the week when I was checking my Saturday Night Live network feed and saw an interview with Andrew Dismukes, which was just fantastic. And hearing him talk about one of his big goals is wanting to work with J.A.J. Moore, and then coming up on the screen is the two of them standing there to host the cold open. That immediately made me really, really excited by that. What I really liked about this is, very current eventy, but instead of here's a current event, let's just go down the beats of the current event and make, very, criticisms or jokes about specific things that happened. They used a current event to do a commentary on something. And so this idea of like, how men are so upset after this moment, while I understood it, I didn't necessarily identify with it, but I empathized with it enough that so many of the jokes, like, when it's like, I wish that the ocean was filled with sugar instead of salt. Like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Just like talk to each other. That stuff resonated with me so much. And I always say this, that in 2024, Saturday Night Live can't be the first and best to the commentary on the specific thing that just happened in current events, but they can still be the elder statesman, de facto authority of here's a thing we've noticed, and that how has no one talked about this before? To that extent, they crushed that. I don't know who any of these people are. I don't know if that was a good Tony Romo or not. But I love that they played with that. It felt long to me. It felt like it did run out of steam, but I did really enjoy it. And I also want to say, I love seeing J.A.J. as the straight man. I feel like that's a muscle we don't get to see him play. And I thought he was a really, really good anchor to this sketch without having to do much. So little long for me, but overall, I really liked it.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that was the theme of the night, personally, for me, was some really great ideas of things that you wouldn't normally think of, and then they try and push that forward. Did they execute on all of them? Probably not. But here, I think, was probably above average compared to some of the other sketches we got tonight. So I was excited. And you did, by the way, Rich, that was another great Keenan line where and I saw somebody, I think it must have been one of the writers on Instagram, did repost this line from Keenan because he delivered it so well.
I wish instead of salt, the ocean was full of sugar.
Just it was like he's doing a James Brown impression, but also there's Keenan in there. And I honestly say I think Keenan was having more fun in this cold open than I've seen him have in weeks. Like maybe going back to the Nate Bargatze episode and that cooking sketch or whatever, because it's been a long time since I've seen Keenan really deliver on the show. And a rare cold streak for Keenan over the last few weeks compared to what we gotten in the last few years. So, but overall, feeling pretty good about the start of the show here. Let's get into the sketches that we really want to talk about from this episode, though. And Bill, I'm going to send it over to you for the sketch that you will make us talk about first.
Yeah, I want to talk about home video. So I wasn't on last week with you guys at all, but boy, the bowling sketch was so great. Can we just thank the heavens that Stephen Castillo is back on this show, and he shows it for a second week in a row with home videos. The whole concept of the remembrance and pulling out the VCR tapes and watching and thinking you're going to watch this very warm video of finding out he's a father, and it's actually a takeoff on the Maury Povich show. And to go from, I think they were made up a little bit too old, Mikey and Dakota. They looked like they were in their 70s, so they clearly hadn't been that long. But to cut back to them in the 90s, I would assume late 90s, and Mikey, everything was perfect. Like the outfits were perfect. Mikey with the dirtbag bowl cut and the goatee, and trying to find out if he's the father. Everything about this was fantastic. This is a sketch that you mentioned it a little bit, where how has this not been done before? This is such a brilliant idea to be able to go back. What happened to all these kids who were announced on the Maury Povich show, on the Jerry Springer show? Do they have normal lives? Are their parents together? Great concept, great execution, great escalation. This was the highlight of the night for me.
I thought Mikey Day in this sketch had a all-time great performance. And, this wasn't his sketch. Like, typically when we get a great Mikey performance, it's in a Mikey and Streeter sketch. This was a Boulas, Castillo, and Fowley sketch, which I think was really cool to get to see Mikey just go all out here. Even former SNL cast member Ben Stiller wrote on Twitter and said, this is such a funny sketch, everyone in it, and Mikey Day is an SNL all-time great. And, for a guy who's been, starting to really, take over analytically on the cast, this is it's again been a few weeks since we've seen Mikey really dominate in a sketch, and I think that this was one of them for me. I loved every minute of this sketch, and I love the concept here. Bill, one of the things we did talk about on Saturday was SNL has covered every single type of talk show in pop culture. I cannot remember an SNL sketch that covered Maury Povich or Jerry Springer or anything like that. Can you?
Jan did a Sally Jesse Raphael back in the early 90s,
that's close.
but
yeah,
that's about as close as we've gotten. Then they kind of leaned into the Oprah stuff, and that was that.
Yeah, we got Oprah, we got morning shows like Regis and Kelly, we got The View, we've even gotten like Ellen and stuff like that, but really nothing like this. And that is, partially why I just thought this was so much fun to get to see on the show. Rich, let's get your thoughts on the home videos pre-tape.
When they're, finding videotapes and they're looking at moments, and of course, all of our comedy nerd brains are going, where is this going? Where is this going? And to be so surprised like that is such a gift these days. And it was such a great surprise. I was so tickled at how they could take something that is fundamentally dated and out of vogue and make it so fresh at using this context. The context of I'm the now adult child that was, in one of these episodes was so, how do I want to say this? There's many times on any sketch comedy show where someone has an idea for something that is past the expiration date, and there is a conceit why we're doing it today, but it's clearly just a reason to go back and make a fun of something. This was clearly not that. This was a commentary on those shows from back in the day and the moment. So I thought it was great. Mikey Day was great. Dakota Johnson, again in a pre-tape, was very effective, and I thought she did a great job playing both the present day mom and the woman who is sleeping around and dancing around on the stage. So she was really great. I thought everything about this was great. I probably didn't love the ending, but that's kind of nitpicking. In general, I thought all of this was really fun and also a really, really strong sketch.
I think, to your point, the casting in this sketch was perfect everywhere. Like Sarah Sherman, who was playing both, the grandmother in the sketch or whatever, like the older woman in the sketch, and then also was able to deliver this line.
The entire time you were sleeping with my daughter,
Like
you were also sleeping with me?
Sorry, she can go with like to do both those things at the same time. Was really great. Like JAJ obviously playing Corey Dervich was really smart. Andrew Dismukes is the kid, and then Marcelo as Spooky. Like I just think everybody was really well casted for this sketch. It felt like a great production all around. Zoe, what did you think of the home videos pre-tape?
Oh, I thought it was hilarious. I think it's funny that you say, Rich, that it was an old concept because I think it was culturally relevant because on TikTok, it's like a big thing to look into people who've been on Dr. Phil or Maury in the past and talk about where they are now. So I felt like it was just like an extension of my For You page, seeing like, oh, this is a commentary on what I'm seeing online right now. I thought it was Mikey in his truest form. He was completely hilarious. He was dominating everything. I think he carried it for me. Just like when he was screaming ugly baby and we got to see Andrew sitting on the couch uncomfortable. I thought of the whole show, this is where Dakota showed like the most dedication. You could see in her eyes as she was playing the older mom, that she was just having so much fun. So I thought it was a highlight of the show. It was nice to see her comfortable. She might have been more comfortable just because it was a pre-tape, but it definitely was a highlight.
Zoe, this is why we need you on every show to just be able to tell us like, where did this come from?
Oh.
I have a question for Zoe because I'm confused. On my TikTok For You page, it's mostly hacks of how to clean your bathroom and magicians doing close-up card magic. Am I seeing something different than you? Is that not what everybody watches on TikTok?
No, sir, it's not.
And mine is cats because my daughter is
Oh,
watching
that's
mine
true.
is all
And,
this
yes,
stuff. Yeah.
and I'm following Surprise Puppy, which is young girls being given puppies and breaking out in tears of joy, which, by the way, is the greatest thing in the world. Yeah.
Yes, I was gonna
Yes.
say mine is all like golden retrievers, like just running. So that's. I
It's
guess-
really brave of you guys to share your For You page. Those are really personal. Thank you for being vulnerable.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, of course, that's what we do here. But yes, I did think that Zoe brought up a line here that I want to play for the audience in case you forget it, which was very funny.
Ugly baby.
Just the idea like on these it's such a trope of these shows to get like all of these people involved. Like I do remember there have been times where I've gone over to friends' houses, like let's say we had like a bunch of people over and we're like, oh, we want to watch something, like what can we watch? And the idea had once come around like, oh, why don't we watch like a bunch of like funniest Jerry Springer moments or something like that, or funniest Maury Povich moments. And like when you watch a like filtered down version of like the best moments of these shows, it is so like batshit crazy that I think there's so much comedy to mine from these. So I really think that whether it was Bula or Castillo or Fally, who put together like the specific tropes from these shows, I think that worked really well. Like all the way to the security guards, like who was just standing in the way, like blocking them from running into each other. Mikey Day running and then getting like thrown into the wall, and then like that being the reason why he has a cane. All those things were so well thought out. So to me, again, pure highlight of the night, 2 for 2 with Castillo coming back week to week.
Throw in one final thought, which Joy reminded me. I'm not a comedy writer, but I do believe most people writing this sketch, the obvious way to go is that the tape is found and the parents are horrified and are justifying and explaining the tape. What a chef's kiss that they were proud of being on that show. That added such a wonderful nuance to the back and forth that there was no explanation. It was just that it was so fun. I loved it.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Okay, Rich, going to send it over to you for the sketch that you want to talk about.
I am going to talk about another pre-tape, which is Please Don't Destroy, the roast with Dakota Johnson. Again, another great use of Dakota where we're doing her in a pre-tape. And as I've said, and I have been mocked on this podcast, I love when PDD stays in their office. I think that is when they shine. I think the limitations of 4 walls brings out the best of what PDD does that other people can't do. And I thought this sketch where Dakota comes in and basically says, like, you know, you're not my cup of tea, you're not my taste. They start roasting each other. And knowing that obviously this is written and planned, that this is not improvised, they take shots at each other that are so personal that it just, we were howling at laughter. Not just, it's like, you know, when you're laughing twice, like I'm laughing at the joke and I'm also laughing that they approved those jokes and then shot those jokes and knew like, oh yeah, we're going to make fun of each other. So everything about this was funny. I thought this was really fun. And then again, the PDD touch, let's bring in a little bit of the crazy town of, oh, you know, should we, you know, Nepo truce, and calling out the Nepo truce with the rings touching, just all of it. So I could go on. I want to hear what everyone else says, but I just absolutely love this.
Yeah, let's play that in case you forgot what happened there.
Nepo truce?
Nepo truce.
A foot in the door and so much more.
Oh,
And the moment where Ben Marshall like tries to go in as well, and they like are like no.
right.
Which is so great. So I sent a message to John Higgins today, and I just said like, hey, like that was so great. I don't think they realized, like, I think they knew they had something good in their hands. I don't think they realized that this was going to be some people's favorite Please Don't Destroy, you know, short ever potentially, because this was a very tight rope to walk, basically, where if they do this and they are not lethal with it, it fails miserably. So you have to go all out with this to get it where you got it. And they landed the plane so well. No, mixing metaphors, but they landed the plane so well here because every joke escalated, and they, you know, it got to the point, Zoe, where I'm gonna go to you next, where like I honestly thought that like they wouldn't go to the next thing, and then they took it even further than I thought every single time. So what did you think of it?
I thought it was probably my favorite sketch of the night. This was the energy from Dakota that I was expecting, because I know she's kind of like mean in her interviews. She can be mean and like flat and dry. So I was excited to see her just be able to just be sarcastic, be mean, and the boys able to like bring it right back at her. And then also exactly what Rich said, like they need to stay in the office. I mean, I love when they go on adventures. I watched the movie. I'm one of the 72% on Rotten Tomatoes or whatever. But when it's simple, it's just them in the office, a lot of words back and forth. That's like the like that's what I like about Please Don't Destroy. I don't need them to go on adventures and as much. Like it's fun sometimes, but not always. So it was definitely probably my favorite sketch. I've watched like 3 times.
Yes, it is so good. Bill, what did you think of it?
Possibly my favorite Please Don't Destroy ever. It's definitely up there. Yeah, as you all say, like just being able to go deep with the hits, making fun of the movie, which I thought was a good movie. Sorry, I don't understand what the hate is on that. But also getting in the meta, within a meta reference of the Lonelier Island. Are they listening to the podcast, John? Is that what's happening here? The fact that we've brought them up so many times in comparison. Yeah, there's so many good jokes in this. The least viral Taylor Swift video ever, to point all the way back to 3 Sad Virgins. So just a lot of really good stuff here. Being able to poke fun at yourself on this level, and Dakota being game for that too, was fantastic.
Yeah, and this is well earned, right? Like you don't get to do this pre-tape when it's the first PDD pre-tape that they do on the show. 25 pre-tapes in now that we've seen live on the show. You get this earned the same way that the digital shorts earned the 100th digital short, you know, where you have all the characters come back. Like this is part of, you know, the head eating its tail type of thing. And I think that is fun here, where they did it in a way that wasn't like too celebratory. They actually just went in a way that was pretty savage, which I think works here. Like Bill, you did mention the Lonely Island line, this one.
I've always wanted to meet the Lonelier Island.
And that's, I think, when they take that first step. And then when you get to the whole Nepo truce, like
Is Daddy-O who you call to get your job?
Like that's when you get, okay, now we're getting into it. Like now we're talking about what everyone's saying in the Instagram comments. And then they like take it to the point where they're like, okay, how are we gonna like land this? And it's when they take it a little bit too far and then decide to walk it a step back.
I'm going to change the cue card so you say the N-word during your monologue.
And like John Higgins being like, and everyone's like, Yeah, it's just like that to me, I think was just a very interesting turn on the sketch where it wasn't just like walking up the stairs the entire time. It was like, oh, okay, no, we can't do that. And I think that was what was fun with it here. So, Rich, let me give you the final word on your sketch that you chose.
Yeah, I mean, everything you guys said and the willingness to make fun of themselves, because it's one thing to just make fun of, oh, we're taking a line from a movie, you know, the title of your movie and making a joke at it. But when she went after their movie, not only did she showed that their Rotten Tomato score is 42%. That's the actual Rotten Tomato score of their movie. And you know they wrote that. So like their willingness to take such deep cuts at themselves beyond kind of surface level stuff was great. I also want to quickly say before we move on, we always kudos to the writing, kudos to the acting. But with these guys, I also want to call out a huge compliment to the editing, because the pacing of this and the use of silence to sort of take it step back and let it breathe before they ramped up again. And again, they're turning this around in 3 days, 2 days, sometimes 1 day. The fact that they edited so well where there were pauses and breaths that kind of get us, really slow us down and bring up to speed was just so well done.
I do want to, great points. I want to throw something out there. Maybe it was just me, but did anyone think that when Dakota said the Lonelier Island line, that Justin Timberlake and Andy Samberg were going to walk through that door and be like, did somebody say Lonely Island? I just saw it like coming. I just saw the Dick in a Box guys like coming in and be like, did somebody call us? Like, oh, no. Okay. Yeah. That type of thing. Like that would have been fine. Right.
That might have broken our brains, John. I don't know that we could have handled that much.
I think it would have been great. Like even if they didn't like, even if they didn't make the sketch about themselves, even if they just popped their heads in the doors and you just saw the Dick in a Box guys be like, did you call us? Like, nope. Okay. So that's John's wish list, but for another time, maybe as we said on the 50th, we'll get the Lonely Island PDD connection. Okay. Zoe, would love to hear the sketch that you wanted to talk about.
Okay, so the sketch I want to talk about is Lost Bag. Because at this point in the night, I was surprised to laugh again after the book club sketch. This one opens with Devin as an airport worker returning lost bags, and Dakota and Michael Longfellow come in as a new couple who just met on a crazy trip. Devin is playing a goofy character who I think in any other timeline would have obviously been played by Keenan. And he says funny things like repeatedly calling Dakota Mrs. Vanessa and acting like they're on a phone call and revealing crazier things from her bag, like diarrhea pills and reading her diary. I thought I chose this sketch because I wanted to talk about the relationship between Keenan and Devin and what that has to mean. Like, you know, like Devin has been growing up watching Keenan on Good Burger and Keenan and Kel and SNL, and I feel like that he must have and has to, and so obvious in the sketch that he's been an inspiration for him and for his comedy. I just think it's so sweet that they get to work together. I loved what I saw from Devin. I want them to let him grow more and give him more time to shine and give us characters and like be confident in him. Although like I say this all about Keenan and how sweet it is to see them there, we didn't need Keenan really. Like I wish they would have let Devin stand on his own legs in this one. And I also really wish that they would have given Dakota something more to do, or just like less focus on her, or find a way to escalate it more. But then again, I think that might come with growing confidence in Devin and his comedic abilities to carry a sketch on his own like that. But that's why I wanted to talk about it. I just thought it was sweet. It made my heart feel warm to see them together, even though I was like, get out of here, Keenan.
Yeah, I actually resonate a lot with what you said, Zoe, because my thought on Saturday was just like, I am so thrilled for Devin Walker that he gets an opportunity to play a character here. The character was okay. Like the character was fine. But I also sort of felt like the character didn't need Keenan to have like the father version of the character. I do understand the larger, implications of having, Devin Walker, who may have idolized Keenan at a certain point. I'm not sure of that, but if that is the case, can understand, where there would be some sort of, connection to putting him in a sketch, a big sketch for Devin Walker, who Devin did help write the sketch. But yeah, I really did think that there was something here with Devin. The sketch itself for me, I don't know that I love, but I did like the character, I think, more than the sketch. So Bill, I'm curious what you thought of the Lost Bag sketch.
Yeah, same. I mean, for the time of the night that it was on, it was fine. not a lot of there. But that was the first thing I thought when I saw it. It was very Keenan-esque. Seeing him come out and do this character. As I said earlier, like Devin has had a really good couple of weeks, and I really hope that's a sign of things to come for the rest of the season. So to see him do a fresh character, my favorite part of this was kind of the meta-ness of making the ISIS reference. You think I'm in ISIS. So kind of bringing it all the way back to the very first sketch that she was in 2015 felt like a little nod to the longtime fans of the show. So it was fine and good for Devin.
I want to come back to that after I get Rich's thoughts on the sketch, because I have a point that I have a general question for all of you and people in the audience as well about making that joke. So, Rich, what do you think of the sketch first, Lost Bag?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with I think everything you guys are saying, very much so. I liked it. I probably liked it net more than most of you. I thought it was better than the very first live sketch of the night. If I would have switched this with the waitress sketch or something else, at least this. And what I say is what I really liked is I liked the sketch that had Devin Walker playing a character that keeps saying the wrong or inappropriate things and is completely lovable about it. I liked that sketch more than the sketch of we're going to say embarrassing things about Dakota Johnson's character. So it's like I liked the first half of the sketch a lot more than I liked the second half of the sketch. And I hope that if they want to bring this character back, which I think that they should, that they lean more on the character of Devin Walker's, TSA, security person or whatever that he was, rather than the game of let's embarrass people by going through their luggage. But I thought it was wonderful. It had a really nice feel to it, and I agree. As much as I love seeing Keenan, I thought I would rather have seen more of Devin in this.
Yeah, I think the problem here for me is I think that Dakota, and maybe this was a problem with Dakota in general as a host, but Dakota and Devin's conversation back and forth can only go so far to still remain interesting. I think what was most interesting here is Devin Walker as a character, and I would like to see him continuing to interact with different people. So my thing was like, I thought this would be people continuously coming in and out of the baggage claim area, and then we would get to see it a la like a Target lady where like different people are coming in, and then he is that, crazy, wacky character there. That is something that I think would have really worked for the sketch. But I think that sort of the relationship between Michael Longfellow and Dakota's character was like a second idea that they had there that I don't know that the two really came together. So that's maybe where my hesitation was. But what I thought was interesting about this ISIS line, and it goes back to something that I've been thinking about a lot over the last few weeks as I've been going through some old episodes of SNL just to check some statistic stuff, is like, Rich, you mentioned earlier that SNL right now is so just made for like clips in the moments, and they're not made as episodes as a whole. And we constantly hear about the reason that they don't have recurring sketches as much as they used to is because most of SNL is consumed in short bursts. So you would have like a runner throughout the night or sketches continuously coming back. It's not like that many people are staying up to 11:30 and watching it live. I guess the calculus in terms of the production cycle has just changed at this point compared to what it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. But then you make an ISIS joke in this sketch, and how many people actually get it? So my question is, what are the rules of 2024 SNL? Is it like we're not allowed to do recurring sketches where you're not going to see Samson Gibson in a bunch of sketches throughout now to the end of the season, but we're allowed to give a throwaway line just for the fans? Like, is that what we should expect now as fans of the show? Rich, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I feel like that is a playing to the back of the room line, and I do think it's fan service. It's because I think the writers are fans of the show and they just enjoy it, but I also do think it's for us, and it's not that it's calculated, but the net result is let's give the diehard fans a nice Easter egg that we can enjoy together, meaning us and the writers and the performers together. But it is not. No one is going to decide what they think of that sketch based on that line. It is a throwaway, so it's only value add for the person who doesn't get it. But I'm sorry, it's value add for the people like us who get it. It doesn't take away from the sketch. Where if it was reliant on what this sketch is, then there's a real cost for the people who don't get it.
Yeah, because I would love to see one, if not two more Samson sketches between now and the end of the year, just to give this character a shot. Like, give him a chance for like Devin to have a hit character, to go with it, to have, kids who watch Saturday Night Live cling on to, Devin Walker as a person and as a character. And I feel like they completely given up on that, but they're still, for some reason, like very much okay with doing those lines to the back of the room. So the concept of like playing for the back of the room with a throwaway line of a joke that happened 10 years ago versus not doing recurring characters, to me, is a little contradictory. So it's just interesting to think about in a way. Zoe,
and I'll also say before you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Rich. Let me get your thought.
The last one for you to Zoe is, what is also strange is we're in a time where they are very much under-indexing on bringing back repeating characters of cast members, and yet very much over-indexing on bringing back sketches that were in a guest host's previous episode. So we're seeing a lot more like, oh, we're doing the poster sketch with Emma Stone, when I don't know that anyone loved it the first time. So it's a weird calculus around that.
Zoe, I want to get your thoughts on this, because you do fall into the demographic of somebody who is more likely to watch SNL in short bursts versus episode after episode.
Yeah, if we want to talk about the ISIS joke specifically, I didn't get it when I watched it in this episode. I was like, ISIS? Why are we talking about ISIS? And with context, I mean, they have to give jokes for the people who are going to make a podcast about SNL. They have to be something for the die-hard fans, but also it makes no sense that they don't want to do reoccurring characters, because every week you have a different host, a different celebrity, a different audience brought in. And then if it's funny, it's funny. It's going to go viral, even if they did the same thing 2 weeks ago.
Fair enough. I could buy that, like, hey, the show is just made for for people to consume it differently than it was before. But when we get jokes like this, I'm not complaining. I love every minute when they do a joke about a sketch that happened 10 years ago. I'm just like, why this and not that? So, Bill, let me get your thoughts on that before we move on to our next sketch.
Yeah, I think the Easter eggs is a better way to go. I mean, you're talking about apples and oranges here, because I think the problem with recurring characters is that if you watch, and we've heard this with people who go back and rewatch the show, how could they do Rosanna Dana 20 times? Well, people weren't watching them clip after clip after clip. They were waiting weeks at a time to see them, and maybe the repeat didn't come on for another year and a half. So you may not see that particular one again. If you're going on YouTube and seeing Lisa from Temecula 18 different times, you're going to get tired of that, and the backlash may not be worth what they think it's what's going to happen by having something like that. I would prefer that they do some recurring characters. I mean, we saw it with David Pumpkins in season 48. The how great that was to see something come back like that. So I wish they would lean into it a little bit more. I don't want to see it go all the way back to the 90s with the It's Pats and the Stuart Smalleys, but there's got to be a happy medium somewhere.
Yeah. I wanted to have this conversation just to say to whoever is listening at the show, I absolutely loved that you put that line in there. So just feed me. That's what I'm asking for. Give me more. All right. Speaking of being fed, let me talk about the sketch that I want to talk about. Yes, I was so pumped that we got a Barry Gibb talk show back on Saturday Night Live this week, the 7th edition of the Barry Gibb talk show. Last one was in season 39. The first time was 21 years earlier on the show. To have Jimmy Fallon back as Barry Gibb, Justin Timberlake back as Robin Gibb, 7th time, just so exciting to me. I mean, this sketch is so stupid, and it's always been so stupid because it's couched in the fact that this is a serious, for some reason, political show about two very nice musicians. Like, for all accounts, is what I understand, is that the Gibbs are like pretty nice people, and they just took like, this is the type of thing that I love, is they took something and made it absolute nonsense. And the fact that like Jimmy Fallon then took the character of Barry Gibb, who, by the way, was on Saturday Night Live the last time that they did this sketch, and made him such an asshole, is what is so hilarious to me in the sketch. Like, I've shown this sketch to people like over the years, and they're like, I don't understand what's happening here. And I'm like, you just got to enjoy the ride because the lines are so stupid that it is great for me. Like, and I do feel like, was this the best edition of the Barry Gibb Talk Show? Definitely not. But some of the line writing here was better than, on a second watch than I really gave it credit for. Some of the lines like that Jimmy had towards Keenan, by the way, who, they were on a cast together once upon a time. So here we go.
You look like if Don King ate another Don King.
Which I thought was great. Jimmy was all out, like full energy in this one.
Every month, I will replace your shoes with an identical pair of one bigger size. So you think your feet are shrinking. I fear nothing.
And then, of course, the pièce de résistance here.
I watched Saltburn with my entire family. And I knew about the bathtub scene beforehand, and I loved it.
I just gotta say, like, even if you're not a Jimmy Fallon fan, like, how can you not love a guy who's just going like 110% into this character, into the sketch? So this was so exciting for me. Loved every minute of it. Bill, what did you think?
Yeah, as a very not Jimmy Fallon fan, this is one of the highlights for me with him. To think that this has been on for 21 years. The first guests I went back to look today were Rachel Dratch, Jeff Richards, and Horatio Sands. That's how long this sketch has been around. So, yeah, it's crazy. He had so many great lines. He was very manic, even more so than I think we've seen in the past. But yeah, I mean, it's formulaic, but it's fun. So I had no problem with this coming back. I love the goldfish line too. I don't think you brought that up, but unhinge my jaw and eat you like goldfish, and then they start singing the snack that smiles back. So yeah, this was a lot of fun. And talk about like the meta-ness and the super fanness of SNL. How many times have we seen a character before they were in a sketch later in the night? Like for him to come out as Barry Gibb in the monologue, and then we see him a few minutes later. Very rare, I think, in the history of the show to have that kind of happen. So that was a lot of fun for me as somebody who's seen the show as much as I have. So
yeah, and for what it's worth, I did not like that. Like, as much as I love Justin and Jimmy together, I really wish that I didn't know that Jimmy was there so that I can watch this happen and be surprised by it.
But did you think that Barry Gibb was did you think they were gonna do that sketch, or that he just dressed up for the monologue, like on first watch?
When I knew he was there I knew this sketch was going to happen, to be honest. Okay. But when if I had not known and been a watcher of the show, if they had come out and did it in the monologue and then not done the sketch, I probably would have been disappointed, honestly. But I do feel like it just spoiled the surprise. I don't know. Rich, what do you think?
A cynical person might say that knowing how the waitress sketch was going to play as the next sketch, they wanted the audience to know, don't turn off your television yet. We've got some funny stuff coming. That said, yeah, I mean, because I've seen every one of these. This makes me laugh so much. And you're right. This is, we talk about how the reverence for Justin Timberlake, I feel like, Jimmy Fallon, because he's been so overexposed being on a nightly talk show and then also having game shows, we forget how good he could be. But I will say this is the rare time where just for me, the star of the sketch is the chemistry between two people in a sketch. And for me, that the chemistry between JT and Jimmy was so palpable, so fun, and like just looking at each other and kind of the timing of when to jump in on the songs, when to milk. I thought it was so fun. This sketch makes no sense. If you are too young to remember this is basically just the white version of What Up With That. And but the two of them together are just so good. And I could have watched that for another 10 minutes.
Yeah, you are right. And it is very rare, like, to find a host cast member combination where the chemistry clicks right away. And that happened between Justin and Jimmy in 2003. And you got to see it for, I guess, 21 years now. So let's get Zoe's opinion on this sketch. Zoe, I'm so curious what you thought of it.
Okay, first, Jon, I have to say, I'm happy for you that this exists because I know it's important to you. So I'm happy that it exists for you. But honestly, to me, this was a Jimmy Fallon jump scare. Like, I didn't know what was going on. It was too much. And I didn't have the deep history. I went back and I watched an old one and I was like, okay, Justin Timberlake, weird teeth. I'm not understanding. I didn't laugh until they talked about Bluey, but that's just because I have seen, as an educator, I've seen a lot of episodes of Bluey, and I understand you have to be a real man if you're not a real man, you're not crying at Bluey. So I mean, I don't know. I'm happy for you. I'm happy
Thank
for
you.
Justin and Jimmy. I'm glad that they're besties. But I could have gone without it, to be honest. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So basically, here, let me just explain this, because I know we have a lot of listeners that are like of Zoe's demographic. So for me, like this, you may be listening and feel like the same thing. And the thing about this sketch and its original machinations, like, Justin and Jimmy, they're born in like the early 80s, right? So like for them, like they grew up like, in households where like people were listening to like disco music and stuff like that. And like they obviously, Justin like loves all different types of music. And the concept here of like taking these two, like celebrity band family and then putting them in a sketch is so bizarre. Like it's almost like it's really like dated, and like the type of sketch here is something you would like never see nowadays. But as close as we can get, Zoe, would be as if like cast members now were making fun of like really popular figures from like 10 years ago. And I guess now like the Bee Gees are like this is like something from like 50 years ago versus like 10 years ago. So it is or to 20 or 30 when this first premiered. So it becomes like more and more dated, and like not everybody in the sketch is even still alive, so in real life. So it is something that is really hard, I think, to comprehend on watching this on a first watch, that like this for me is like as much fan service as you can possibly get from Saturday Night Live. Like you have had to watch this sketch before or just love Justin and Jimmy to love this sketch. And for me, that's why I liked it. I can tell you the only thing I absolutely hated in this sketch was Dakota Johnson being in this sketch. I think there was absolutely no reason for her to be there. She looked out of place and awkward in this whole thing. They just threw her in because she's the host, but they didn't have to do that. And I think this sketch would have been much better served for having another cast member there. Rich, what do you think?
I think it would have been disrespectful to not have her there. I
Really?
feel like because she is the guest host. They didn't give her much because that's the nature of this kind of what up with that role that any cast member is going to play if you're not one of the two leads. But I almost felt like, especially, for me, I felt like she needed to be there, so at least we're anchoring in this is still a Dakota Johnson episode, even if she's game enough to take a back seat.
Yeah, I just think you were opening. You're fine. That's fine, but you're just opening yourself up to like the thing that you may have been. Maybe SNL didn't care, and maybe Dakota didn't care, but you're opening yourself up to everybody who was concerned that the musical guest was going to take over the show. Was that because like at the end, which like again, like one of the funniest parts of this sketch to me is the ending where they're singing the like talking it up, and then they're both dancing, and like the stupidity of them like close to the camera where they're like moving their heads forward and stuff like that is again like a very like 70s like dance thing. And Dakota Johnson just being in the back, like slowly clapping her hands, like just was very awkward.
When everyone else is weighed in, I'll throw in a thought about what they could have done with Dakota Johnson that I think would have been fairer to her, but I'll let everyone else go first.
Okay, Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, she looked awkward. Bowen looked a little awkward, but I wonder what his reverence for past SNL is, because I hope he appreciates having been in sketches with Kristen Wiig, Maya Rudolph, Jimmy Fallon, and Justin Timberlake over the last month. Like that's pretty cool. He was the only current cast member, non-Keenan obviously, who's been there since this sketch debuted. So yeah, I found him a little awkward in it as well, almost like he was intimidated by the situation. Maybe he didn't get it either. I mean, he's a lot younger than all those guys too. So I have no problem with Dakota being it as far as that part of it goes. I think that she wasn't needed, but yeah, I agree with Rich to the point where I don't know that you want to take her out of it.
Zoe, any thoughts?
I just have a question. In past Barry Gibb's talk show sketches, has Justin Timberlake always been the host?
No, actually not every time. I think Cameron Diaz, he was dating her in 2005, and then I think he cameoed in that sketch.
Okay.
Yes.
Because my question was just, what have other hosts done during this situation, and what?
Yeah, I think Cameron Diaz in that case was just like she played Nancy Pelosi in that one,
Yeah,
and then
she
I
was
think
in that.
Yeah, and I think the last time they did this, Jimmy Fallon was the host and Justin Timberlake was the musical guest. So like you knew that they were going to end up doing this together. But yeah, and I also just say like I don't know if you've ever talked about this sketch at all in the past on the SNN, but the theme song for the sketch, like the Nights on Broadway, like take on the sketch, is this not like one of the best theme songs in SNL history?
Fantastic.
Like maybe, yeah,
100%. Yeah.
I think like that may be the bracket that we do next, which is like the best. We once did SNL catchphrases. Like we might do the best SNL theme songs of all time because this could be.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was really excited about this one. So thank you for bringing it back, SNL.
Here's
All
what
right,
I'll
let's go.
throw out to you, John, before we just because you read the Dakota Johnson. Here's an out of the box thought.
Sure.
If you've got JT, you're going to have Jimmy. You want to do an iconic sketch, but you don't want to ice the host as much. I would argue pressure them, do an Omeletville sketch, which is just as fun, if not more fun, and give her a chance to be a character on the street so that she could materially play with them instead of being an extra. That may not have been as fun, but I do think it would have been fairer to her and actually, to me, a funnier reoccurring sketch than Barry Gibb Talk Show.
So the only thing that would you suggest that like she is the opposing mascot? Because
or she's a third banana. Do him,
yeah.
Jimmy's the opposing mascot, and then often we'll do, and then here comes a third mascot who's got a lighter load, but it still gets a chance to do a little bit of singing, a little bit of shtickiness, so that she's not just an extra.
Yeah, I mean, I love those sketches as well. I think she would have gotten like that if that was like a football game, like she's losing that like 70-0, like, you know, like she's getting destroyed, like she doesn't match up, like that's a tough sketch to do. So I agree with you, Rich. I would love to see it, but I think she's getting like completely overshined in that one as well. But interesting thought, what could have been there. Okay, let's go around the roundtable one more time and talk through anything else from this episode we want to make sure we cover. So Bill, anything else on your list?
Yeah, it wasn't great, but you and I were talking just a couple weeks ago, predicting what recurring things may come back. And 2 weeks in a row, we got stuff that was not brought up by anybody. We got Garrett from Hinge last week, and we got the Big Dumb Hats recurring this week. I'd love to see Heidi and Chloe working together again. I think this was probably Dakota's best live performance of the night. And to kind of get into the Stanley Cup joke of it all, I think they had to find a way to do that. There were some funny jokes here, but it was mostly just not great. But I do like Marcelo coming out and them kicking him out and saying he sounded like a baby on a tit. So that was fun.
Yeah, I think that, like, again, you got to credit the props department for all like the switching in and out and like the stage handlers who are, you know, making this whole sketch happen. It's a big production thing to do this. You know, again, the sketch to me is interesting because it starts off as a like, let's make fun of the white women that would be walking around with the Stanley's cups, and then it devolves into what crazy cup is going to come out next. So it's almost like the game changes halfway through it. But I did like this one more than the last one. Rich, did you?
I liked it. I had the exact same comment you were going to make. I liked the first sketch about making fun of people with cups and that craze that makes no sense versus just making fun of seeing cup prop comedy. And I will also agree with Bill, very smart to give Dakota a sketch where she could stare at the cue cards on live TV, not only her own lines, but see everyone else's lines so that the rhythm was much cleaner because she was able, because she doesn't do this for a living, she could see it. And so I thought her delivery here was much stronger than other live pieces. So fun, overall fun too.
Zoe, did you like Big Dumb Cups?
I thought the premise was funny and it started funny, and I know you probably know this, but it was 4 minutes and 12 seconds, which was just too long to be talking about a dumb cup for me. As a dumb cup person, I identify as that, but it just felt long and it went on for like what felt like forever.
Yeah, I feel you. Rich, what did you there's anything else you want to talk about from the episode?
Yeah, just a shout out to again, a weekend update. Heidi Gardner, the tarot So inventive. We've never seen that, anything like that. And as soon as they start, okay, we're going to do tarot cards again, comedy nerd, playing through all the tropes we're going to see. And as soon as she turns over a card that's the newsman, I'm like, oh my God, this is fresh. I have not seen this before. And there's nothing fresh about tarot cards, but it was a take that was so fresh. And just again, Heidi and the writers just knocked out of the park. I thought this was such a fun game to play with, to play with Che. It's so fun.
Yeah, and I just think two things really worked for her here. It was with Che and not Jost, because we see characters like this, make fun of Jost many times. And then also that camera angle where you're seeing the overhead shot of the cards was so like different than anything we're used to. So I think those are really to her advantage. And then this was just a very good Heidi Gardner character. I think this is one that we could have seen in her first couple seasons where everyone was like, Heidi is the new queen of Weekend Update. So this was a great character, her Janvi character. Zoe, did you like Heidi on Update, and anything on Bowen as well?
Oh my gosh, I loved Heidi on Update. If you weren't going to bring her up, I was. It made me want to rewatch every Heidi Update piece that has happened. It made me remember, like, I really fell in love with her when she was doing the Bailey Gisbert like movie reviews, and it made me think like, oh, her and like Michael Che have such fun chemistry. I was just like, she's a star. I thought it was so funny, from like her facial expressions, the things that she said. I just thought it was perfect. And on Bowen as Ethan, I thought that was fun. It also made me think of the Bailey Gisbert or maybe like the bar mitzvah boy energy from like Vanessa Bayer, like just like young boy awkward likes movies on Update. I was like, we need to see more of that and how we could play that. So I thought that was really fun.
Bill, what do you think of our Update pieces we got here, specifically Heidi, and even if you want to touch on Bowen as well?
Yeah, Heidi, we've been clamoring for more Heidi on Update and new characters, and we got a really good one this week. I think her play with Che was fantastic. I love the button on it with Colin being the catfish. So that was a lot of fun. Didn't love Bowen's as much. There was some funny lines. He made the most out of it. I don't think there was a lot here. I did like the in memoriam when it was just a blank screen and he said, I don't know that anybody that died this year. So, but yeah, overall pretty good.
Zoe, what about you? Anything else on your list that you would like to bring up tonight?
No. The only thing I didn't say is that the Lost Bag sketch, it was a good use of Michael Longfellow's handsome face and dry humor. So I just wanted to shout him out for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We need more of that. Please, SNL, give us more Michael Longfellow. I would love to see that. Yeah, for me, I think we covered a lot of those things that I wanted to talk about tonight. A couple sketches we didn't mention. I'm surprised none of you wanted to talk about
chicken fongers.
No one had that on their list? Nope. Okay.
How did that make it to the first sketch of the night? Can anyone tell me how that made it to the first sketch of the night?
Is it possible that the people who decide that forgot to write down or decided not to write down the order and then just said the wrong order, similar to the waiters? Is that possible?
I was so excited when they opened on this because I was someone who worked in restaurants for a long time. I was the server, the bartender who didn't write down orders, and I got them all right. Never a chicken fongers or an Advil on the rocks. But so I was feeling the relatableness of it, and then it just right over the cliff like Toonces. So not a lot here.
Yeah, nothing else there. And just looking through my my sound clips, no, nothing else. I did like Bowen's this line.
Asian don't raisin.
I thought that was a great line from Bowen Yang as well. I wanted to bring that up. But yeah, overall, honestly, pretty. Look, to me, it was a little bit of an inconsistent show, but there was a lot of highlights here compared to last week. So I thought this was a great roundtable to get to talk about this particular week of SNL, and it's just a fun vibe overall. I am enjoying what we got here this week, and hoping we'll get another good show next week. Before we wrap up our discussion, though, on this week's episode, let's talk about the MVP voting that we got from the listeners this week. So we asked you on social media every single week on Monday mornings. We say, give us some MVPs from the week. Could be the host, musical guest, anybody who appeared in the episode, could be a cameo or two. So we want to get your votes. And panel, I'm going to ask you who you think the top 3 MVP voters are for this week, and we will put them up on screen. So Bill, how do you think the listeners voted this week?
I'm gonna go Devin, Justin, and Dakota.
Okay, Rich.
My inability to guess what the social media guesses is amazing. So, but I'm gonna go JT, Heidi, and Mikey Day.
All right, Zoe.
I'm gonna go Justin, Heidi, and Devin.
All right, Justin, Heidi, and Devin from Zoe. Let me show you who our top 5 vote getters are from week number 10 of season 49. So Jimmy Fallon was the number 1 vote getter. I have to say, this may be the most evenly distributed votes we've ever gotten. So just squeezing out number 1 MVP this week was Jimmy Fallon at 19%. I think that people thought that he really brought it in that sketch. I mean, we got a lot of votes for Jimmy today, so that might be a little bit of a surprise. Rich, I'm curious what you think of that, Jimmy in the 1 spot.
I'm surprised. I mean, I will agree. I mean, he dominated. That sketch was like, oh, right. Jimmy Fallon's really funny. Like, that was very memorable. So I'm surprised, but not surprised. I'm more pleasantly surprised to see PDD in number 2.
Yeah, so PDD is at number 2 with 18%, so just right under Jimmy at 19%. So the first time, I don't know if it's ever, first time in a long time, we've had PDD in these top spots. So people were very excited about that this week. Number 3, we have Mikey Day at 11%, just squeezing out like on a decimal point, Justin Timberlake at 11% as well. So obviously Mikey Day had that great moment earlier with the home video sketch that we talked about. And Justin Timberlake, clearly a very big deal to have back at the show. Heidi Gardner's in 5th with 9%. So I didn't even read out the stats from this week, which you'll get into more on by the numbers. Basically 8 sketches for Dakota, Jimmy 2 sketches and introduction. Dave Chappelle appearing in the Good Nights. I'll get Rich's thoughts on that in 1 second. But JT 2 performances, 2 sketches, and then Keenan, Heidi, Sarah 4 sketches. So Heidi gets the award there in 5th place. 3 sketches from JJ, 2 from Mikey, Chloe, Bo, and Andrew, 1 for Ego and Punky this week. Molly and Devin are our feature players in 3 sketches. Marcelo and Michael Longfellow in 2 sketches, and Chloe Trost in just 1 sketch. So our MVP votes for this week, top 5, Jimmy Fallon, PDD, Mikey Day, Justin Timberlake, and Heidi Gardner. Rich, I know you're a big Good Nights guy, so any thoughts on Dave Chappelle showing up there?
Well, I will recuse my opinion of his last special, which unfortunately I saw in its entirety. But I will say I'm a purist. No matter how big of a star you are, this isn't a walk on. You don't just get to walk on the stage because you're in the studio. If you're not on the show, you're not on the stage. So if he wanted to play an extra in a sketch, then you can show up. But to me, no matter how packed the backstage is with A-list celebrities, you don't get to be on that stage unless you were in the show. So for me, not a big deal, but I was just like, no, you don't do that. Come on.
Yeah, I was more like, look, I know like Dave Chappelle, a lot of thoughts on Dave Chappelle, but my first thought as an SNL fan was like, don't just like walk up on stage for the Good Nights. Like I think Chris Rock did this once before. I think Usher once like showed up in a Good Nights very randomly. Like it has happened a few times over the years, but I'm really not a fan because it is actually like, it's not even just like me being an SNL purist. It's also like the confusion of people who like watch the end of the show and they're like, wait, was Dave Chappelle in a sketch? And then you like can't find him. Like the whole point of the Good Nights is that like these are the people that appeared in the show. So it defeats the purpose of it.
And add to that, it's almost insulting to us as the audience because it's like, oh, you were there, but you couldn't be in a sketch. Like, well, if you're there, why didn't you get to play? Why you should have played with everyone else during the show, but you're just there to wave goodnight. That's no. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, very, very weird footnote on this episode. All right, let's turn our attentions to what is happening next week at the show. A host that people are very excited about with Io Debary coming to host the show with music from Jennifer Lopez, another musical guest from a different era, and someone who's hosted the show a few times as well. But I know, like, people were saying, SNL, whatever you got to do, get Io to host the show. So I think people are very pumped for it. I see Zoe nodding her head. So let me go to you first, Zoe. Are you excited for Io to come in next week and host the show?
I'm so excited I could die. I've seen everything she's in. I love her to death. I'm very, very excited, and she can do no wrong. Every sketch will be perfect. Yeah, that's all I have to say about it. I love her, and I'm proud of her already.
Can you let me just besides the fact that you love her, let me just ask for the listeners who may not be as familiar with her work as you are,
Okay.
what is it that we should be looking forward to? Is there a thing maybe that you recommend that people check out of hers?
Well, you guys like comedy, listeners, so you can watch some of her Comedy Central like little clips on YouTube. Um, just any interview with her, she's hilarious. There's some like TikToks of her dancing. She's got like the perfect comedic timing. She's confident in herself, and when she's playing in a comedic role, like in the movie Bottoms, she's free and expressive, and nothing like holds her back. And so I hope she's gonna bring some of that to SNL and just be able to be open and hilarious. And I see someone in the comments that says big mouth, like that's where you can look her up and hear her voice and her comedy in there. So it's just like, go look her up, go watch her, watch The Bear. It's not going to make you laugh in the same way, but like she slays.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she is a writer on Big Mouth as well. So I think if you're going to look for a couple things, maybe to check out this week is, Big Mouth. There's also Is the Bear, which is, a huge show that people were expecting to maybe see somebody from to host. And I probably assume that is what a lot of the promotion is for this week, is for The Bear. Bill, what are your thoughts on Io hosting the show and the music from Jennifer Lopez?
Very, very excited about Io. Maybe not as excited as Zoe is. I don't think I will die, but yes, I'm excited. The Bear is probably the best show of the last year or so. So really good show. And her stand-up and improv background is fantastic. She's been doing this a long time, so she's going to be a natural fit, like a Keke Palmer or an Aubrey Plaza. So I think she's going to do great. J-Lo, I don't know. I guess Hoobastank wasn't available, so we're just going with it. I don't know.
Rich, what are your thoughts on our headliners for next week?
I mean, really what everyone else said. I mean, The Bear, second season, one of my favorite dramas on television, happened to be called a comedy, but it was one of my favorite dramas. And again, when we talked about, you're taking someone that, yes, she's known for being in a drama, but she's a stand-up comedian. She's an improviser. She's been in comedies. So she's been in front of audiences. So she's going to be very comfortable in front of an audience. So I think a lot of people won't, even though The Bear second season actually did very well on viewership, it really, for the first season was very under the radar. The second season had a huge viewership. So I think there will be a lot of people who are going to not know exactly where they know her from, but I think she's going to do very well. And also Jennifer Lopez.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Jenny from the Block in a sketch or two, because she's obviously been pretty prolific in her time at the show. Did double duty twice, hosted another time very recently, actually a few years ago. That feels like, I don't even remember that happening, but it did, with musical guest Baby back in December of 2019, and she was obviously a musical guest her first time as well with host Alan Cumming. So just fascinating to get another musical guest from, it feels like an era's past here again. But most of the attention, I think, this week, unlike the previous week with Dakota and JT, will be on Io and what she will do at the show. So I am very excited to have her at the show and looking forward to all of that. Before we get there, we still have one more show here on the SNN, and that is our By the Number show on Wednesday night. We got Mike back with Victoria. We'll be there as well. So excited to have them back together. Sammy K will be on that show, I believe, as well. So a lot of fun going through the screen time from this week. I would say one of the more, when I was looking at the analytics a little bit, one of the more interesting SNL episodes this past week for analytics. So I'm excited to hear what Mike is going to say about all of the stats from this week of Saturday Night Live. And then, of course, we'll be back for the Hot Take Show on Saturday to break everything down from the Io and J-Lo episode. Bill, thanks for joining us tonight. Where can listeners check out everything you got going on?
John, thank you for having me. Rich, let's not make it another 3.5 years. Okay. I can be found at BKLove73 at all the socials. So thank you once again.
Yeah, you guys have some like Justin Jimmy chemistry going on. Got to have you guys back. But it was a lot of fun. Rich, thank you for joining us. Anything you would like to plug?
No, if you're in LA, storytelling, I'm around doing the Moth and the Grand Slam in a couple 8 weeks or so, and online at Rich Tack.
Thank you. Zoe, thanks so much for joining us as well. I know you're not a big plugging person, but still, thank you. And anything you'd like to say to the listeners?
Thanks for listening, and it's been fun talking to you guys, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zoe. If you never want to miss a show that we got going on here, you have to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and make sure to follow us on all social platforms: Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok. Apparently, you got to be on TikTok to catch all the jokes on SNL nowadays. So you got to follow us over there as well. And if you did enjoy the conversation tonight, please give us a thumbs up on the YouTube video so more people can catch everything we have going on here at the SNN. All right. On behalf of Bill Kenney, Rich Tackenberg, and Zoe Walker, my name is Jon Schneider from the SNN. And I just have to do it one more time. We'll see you next time, guys. Have a good one.